Good afternoon and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge on key business topics and specialist areas. And our host today is BizSmart Select member Gill Hutchinson from Aardvark Marketing Consultants. She is here today to talk to us about building a simple and effective marketing plan. Before we start our webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen and post any questions that you may have for Gill, and she will answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you again for joining us, and Gill, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here again. Thanks for inviting me, Caroline. Planning is the most boring topic. It's probably guaranteed to put you all asleep, so I hope to keep you awake for half an hour and just give you a few hints and tips as to how it needn't be such a big deal after all. So let's start with thinking about why we should plan at all, because let's face it, this is something that everybody knows they need to do, but we're not always great at it. So lots of reasons why we don't. I was actually speaking recently to a major high street bank manager, and he works with fairly large businesses, those with turnovers between 5 million and 15 million. And when I asked him how many had a marketing plan, he estimated that only about 20% had one of these at all, no matter what format it was, but just the fact they had something. So I had started asking him a bit more questions about what sort of companies he worked with, and he basically realised that the top 20% in terms of performance, in other words, the businesses that were really growing and going somewhere, were the same 20% who actually had a marketing plan. So I don't think that's coincidence. I think perhaps not. I think perhaps those top performers are doing something that we all know we should do, and so we should be imitating them and going with it. So the vast majority of businesses, maybe you too, don't actually have a marketing plan. And a lot of us feel that we don't have the experience or time to do it. Something else is always more important. Some of us feel that we write a plan and then everything changes, so perhaps there isn't much point. Very few people like doing it, and sometimes we just say it's too difficult. We get into topics about how to measure something and we don't know how to do that, or we talk about finance and budgeting and we hate talking about that, so it doesn't happen. So here we are, a rather boring and unglamorous message. If you've never done this before, let's make a start. Simple marketing plan in 2016, and once you've done it, you can give yourself a pat on the back, because just by doing it, you put yourself in that winning top 20% of businesses. So these are the reasons why we should plan, and probably most of you know these already. So just setting aside time away from the day-to-day hassle is a good exercise in itself. Thinking about your businesses, top performing businesses do it. They do it because they like the good systems and processes. And I know those are more yawny words for most people. But you can identify challenges, you can identify areas you need to improve, or you could improve. And if you ever want to sell your business, having proper systems and processes, including planning, implementation, review, these are all going to help you sell your business and get a good price for it, because it means it's a robust business with proper systems and processes in place that other people can pick up and run with. You'll also find that it reduces cost. So many people who work in marketing will realise that they get people come to them at the last minute because they've got an exhibition on, or they need an advert for a deadline and they haven't designed something. And doing things last minute means it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's very stressful. So just having a plan and thinking about what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, can reduce the stress and help you plan in advance. And that's really critical when we've got so many other calls in our time as business owners. And you might find there are different areas of the business, for example, finance or sales, and we have to coordinate what we do in marketing with what they're doing. So sticking to a timetable, have a draft plan and a final version is important. But my favourite, and it's not on this slide, my favourite reason for having a plan is that it allows you to deal with those really annoying salespeople on the phone. And just saying to them, sorry, it's not in my budget this year, just tells them in a straightforward way that you're not open to persuasion. They can send you some information for you to consider next year, but you're not going to waste time in it now. So that actually saves you the time, falling into the trap of talking to people you don't really want to talk to because it wasn't on the proper plan. So those of you that have been listening to my webinars before will have seen this element of a marketing strategy and a plan development. So we need to plan, implement, measure, review, and then use that review to inform the next plan. And guess what? The more you do this, you'll improve the accuracy of your planning. So we find working with clients, whatever their size, whatever their shape, whatever business they're in, we have the discipline of a regular monthly meeting. So we talk to them about what's going on, we talk to them about what's past, we have a look ahead to see what's coming up and what we need to be doing, getting in place so that we're not in those last minute panics. And that really helps. It's the discipline of looking at a plan and reviewing it on a regular basis. It will improve your business, I promise you it will, and you'll get better at it. So our planning, I'm not going to talk about this today, it's not the subject of the webinar today, but we need to have all the building blocks you can see at the bottom of your screen in place before you do your plan. So you can see at the bottom we've got customers and customer understanding, proposition, then we've got to set a budget and some objectives that we're trying to achieve with our marketing. Then we can do the strategy, and once we've got all of that in place, then we do the plan. So if you haven't got those things in place, I'm not going to talk about that now, but they do need to be there. I'm just going to talk about planning today. Slight aside though, getting the strategy right. So most of you will have sat down in January after Christmas, thought, right, 2016, what are we going to do? What are we going to do differently? I might want to try some new social media platforms. I might be toying with the idea of starting some marketing automation, some new IT. I might be looking at a new networking group. Or maybe it's about time we went back to that direct mail that we used to do. So for most businesses, my first reaction would be to say, well, that's fine. Those are all good tactical things. They might have a value, but don't dive into them yet. Don't do any of them yet. Let's think about things. It's not that I think the tactics won't work or they can't work or that you shouldn't try new things. Of course you should. You should try new things all the time. But you need to do something else first to make sure whatever you do has the best possible chance of success. And that thing is getting the strategy right. So if you take one thing away from today, this is what I'd like it to be. If we look at the tactical things you do with your marketing, the day-to-day activities you do, you can get that wrong or you can be good at it. I don't know which camp you're in, but we can do things well, we can do things not so well. And the same with your marketing strategy. Businesses that think about the strategy and what they're trying to achieve, sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. So many research projects over extended time periods, both in the UK, abroad, businesses of all shapes and sizes. Researchers have looked at the relationship between tactics and strategy, and you're in one of these four camps. So you probably don't need to be Einstein to see that if you get both the strategy and the activity right, your business is going to thrive. And if you get them both wrong, it's going to die. That's not really surprising. But it gets interesting when we look at the other two boxes. And this is what I'd like to take away. The blue box, we get the marketing strategy. Which direction are we trying to go in? What are we trying to achieve with the messaging for our business? If we get that right, even if we're not very good at the day-to-day marketing activity, the tactical stuff, our business is going to grow. It's going to survive. We have time to improve getting the tactics right. It gives us that time. The business will be fine. If we get the strategy wrong, we look at the red box, but we're ever so good at doing our marketing, the business will still collapse. It will still die. It doesn't matter how efficient we are at doing our social media or updating our website. If the information and the strategy on that website and social media is wrong, that business won't survive. So you need to get your strategy right first. If your marketing isn't delivering the results you need, your first priority should be to check the strategy. And only when you think that's right, you switch your attention to the tactics. So make sure when you start pedaling your bike that it's pointing in the right direction. If you're in the wrong direction, your business is going to fail. And if you're not sure about whether your direction is right or wrong, seek out some professional advice. You've probably got a BizSmart advisor or probably other professionals you trust. It's more important than getting any of the tactical stuff right. So assuming that you know what the right strategy is for your business, the plan is simply which activities, when we do them, setting the budgets and measuring the success or otherwise of what we're doing. So our plan can now be very simple, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about. So what's in the plan is the who, where, why, what and when. All the boring project management stuff that you need to decide before you implement something. So it can be a very simple list. Thinking about what you want to do, when you're going to do it, when you're going to plan it, design it, implement, when you're going to complete and review it. Thinking about where you want that activity to take place. It could be the location of your business is very important. It could be you're going into new markets geographically, or it could be in terms of the channels. Are you going to use which media you're going to use, whether it's trade or in-store or word of mouth, or what are you actually going to do for your channel. There are two audiences for marketing. There's your internal audience, your staff, and your external audience. So don't neglect your internal ones, and certainly let them know what's going externally so that they know what you're trying to achieve and they can talk to anybody. Certainly anybody who's customer facing should know what you're doing with your marketing plan. They should be aware of that. Have a good reason to do it. What exactly are you trying to achieve? Is it going to alter what people know about your business, think about your business? Are you going to educate them in some way? And then what do you want to do as a result of that education? Do you want them to click on your website, pick up the phone, contact you by email? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And of course, you've got to have a realistic budget. And budget doesn't just involve finance, it can be resources. So do you have enough people in your business to implement your marketing plan? And have they got the right level of training and skills to do it properly? So now we're ready, and I absolutely advocate simplicity. So if you're a paper and pen type of person, and lots of people are, grab yourself a large piece of A3 paper and do your marketing plan on that. And you can then stick it up on the notice board and it's there to see on a day-to-day basis. If you're happy with computers, a simple Excel spreadsheet will suffice. And you can see on here, I've got an example of one that we use. This is just based on Excel. If you'd like a copy, I can send you one by email afterwards. And it's a bit small, so I apologise for that. It's the only way I can get it on the screen. But basically, you've got time periods along the top. This one's done by month, but it could be a weekly plan, a quarterly plan, whatever's sensible for you and your business. It's going to make most sense for you to implement it. And then down the left-hand side, we've simply got a long list of all possible activities that you can do with your marketing. And you see you're just going along and marking with a colour when activities are going to take place. So this is simply what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. It's a nice visual plan. So how do you choose your activities? Well, most people, when they're reviewing, say last year, 2015, they'll start with a list of the things they did last year. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Put that on your shortlist and review what you consider to be the return on investment for each one, what went well and what went badly. And that might be exactly the same list as you're doing again. It's absolutely fine. But remember, go back to your strategy and consider, are there other activities that would achieve these objectives? Are there other possibilities, or are we quite happy that what we're doing is delivering the results we want? So there's nothing wrong with doing the same as last year, but only when you reviewed it and you decided that is actually the right thing to do. And then in terms of timing, consider whether you want to do drip feeding, so little by little every month, keep adding to the information going out there, keep being consistent with your message, or do you want a burst of activity around particular points in your business or timing that's important? So for a lot of businesses, they've got seasonality. They might be busy at Christmas, they might be busy in the summer, so you want your marketing obviously to be stronger just before you want people to take action at those times. So consider your seasonality, consider your cash flow, what's affordable. Sometimes it's better to have drip because it's easy to manage the cash flow. And keep an eye on what your competition do. Don't necessarily do exactly what they do. You have a choice. You can follow what they do because you think that's the right plan for you and the right timing for you, or you can stand out from the crowd and do it slightly differently, do it a different way, do it at a different time. Certainly when lots of people want advertising space, the price goes up, and it's sometimes cheaper to go sort of out of season, if you like, and build your knowledge of your business when it's a bit cheaper and you can get more bang for your buck. So be aware of what your competition do, but don't follow them slavishly. There might be a reason to do something different. And then also think about your responsibilities. Who signs off each of these activities? If it's a monthly or a weekly thing you're doing, maybe you don't have to sign off every week. Maybe you can set somebody in train to do your marketing for you, and as long as you've got a handle on the direction and what they're doing, that's absolutely fine. So clear set of activities, clear responsibilities, clear budgeting, and just review that at least once a month, but once a month is fine if that's all you can manage to fit in. So, to keep it simple, do not try and do everything at once. Limit your activities. You've got your strategy right, and now you need to implement that strategy. So think about them. If you're thinking about, for example, social media platforms, think about the one or two that are going to work well for your business. If you're a B2C and want to talk to consumers, then Facebook is a great place to start. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're B2B, you might want to try LinkedIn or Twitter. But if you try and do all of the platforms, you're going to spread your efforts too thinly, especially if you're a small business. We need your budget to work effectively, so don't try and do too much. Keep your messaging on a few platforms and do it well, rather than spread out over too many. And then think about what messages and themes you want to talk about. So for small businesses, sometimes it's very helpful to have a monthly or a weekly theme that you're going to talk about, and you can use the same materials. So if there's a particular awareness day coming up, or you're launching a new product or service, you use the same materials and they go out across all the channels at the same time. And that saves you time and effort. So whether you're using PR or social media, newsletters, you might want to do advert or leaflet or a new website or a new page on your website, you can use all the same stories, the same themes across all of those media. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So try and keep things as simple as you can. So what happens when you've got something major? So something like a trade show, or actually designing and implementing a new website, they're quite complicated. So don't try and do that on your simple plan. Have a separate project plan just for those activities. So for one example, we work with a client that has attendance at an international trade show, and they first came to talk to us because this trade show happens in Germany, and it only happens every 4 years. So it was absolutely critical that everything that went into doing that trade show, their stand, their branding, their videos, their merchandise, their hard copy, all said the same message, the right message, because they only got an opportunity to talk to those international buyers once every 4 years. So if you've got something major, treat it as something major and treat it as something separate. Many businesses struggle, for example, with websites. If you're having a new website, they don't properly plan it in the first instance. The agency gets involved and things drag out and drag out and drag out. Try and have your planning and your briefing done separately and stick to the plan. It will really help. So take those off the day-to-day activities if there are big events coming up. Budgeting, we all hate figures. Well, no, maybe not everybody, but a lot of us do. So there are options. Again, this is an example of a spreadsheet that sits behind our activity plan in the template that I'm showing you. And it is just, again, the same list of activities, the same timescales, if these happen to be in months, across the top, and it just adds it up so you can work out what you're spending in each month and what you're spending across each activity, and you've got a whole annual budget. Try and have a contingency fund somewhere. Something will change in your business. Some opportunity will come up that you do want to look at, and if you've allocated all your budget and you just haven't got the money, you will have to say no. So try and put a little bit aside for contingency. And then the choice of how you do this is up to you. You can either put all the cost onto that plan when you pay for it. So upfront, this is when I get the invoice and that's when I pay for something. Or you can spread the cost. So for example, if you're doing some advertising and you're doing it over a 3-month period, you could divide that invoice into 3 and put a third into each month. Or you say if you want the cash flow basis, you just put it on a hit at the start. It doesn't matter which one you do, so long as you're consistent. Don't try and mix and match them. So either when you pay for it or when you're going to get the benefit. The next obstacle that people sometimes tell me is I haven't got a clue how to measure what I do. And if I don't measure it, what's the point of planning? I might as well just get on and do it. So one thing to think about when you're planning your activity is how easy is it to measure? and what's quick to measure. So start with those KPIs, or the key performance indicators, that are going to tell you whether you're on track or not, but start with what's easy and quick. Does measuring that fit with your objectives? Can you tell whether you're going to hit your objectives by measuring that? And if not, you might have to be a bit clever with what you're measuring and how you measure it. Then think about frequency. Can you get yourself into a place where you have a nice straightforward routine? So for example, looking at Google Analytics, if you do it once a month, you don't do it daily, you don't get caught into the trap of spending loads of time, just once a month, half an hour, done and dusted. But one thing to consider, although we can measure digital activity quite easily, don't assume that something, if it's hard to measure, isn't worthwhile doing. Something old-fashioned like sending a good invitation or a good leaflet through the post can be very effective in generating sales and generating inquiries. And all you measure is that it's gone in the post and whether you get a sale or not. It's not easy to measure the interim, or so for example they've read an email or they click through to my website, whatever. But just because it isn't easy to measure doesn't mean it isn't effective. So don't be put off if you think it's hard, just try and measure something. And then think about when you've actually done an activity, how did you implement it? How was your project management? Did everything happen on time or were you late? Did it happen on budget or did you overspend? Was the strategy right? So think about how you actually project managed what activity you did, and think about maybe using a traffic light system for green was great and red we made a mess of it and amber it was okay. Looking at those things will give you the learns for next time and doing it better. You can look at results, so sales figures, most people tend to map those anyway, so that's really easy to do. How many responses you got, how many new leads you got, whether you built up some new contacts from your newsletter, whether you got a bigger circulation for something. All these are important and they're easy to measure, so it's not just the digital stuff. And the other thing I would highly recommend is that you set up some graphs rather than looking at tables of data. Most of us are not very good at tables of data and we have to learn to use that. If you have a graphical system so you can see January, February, March, April, and is there a trend or a pattern, how does it compare to last year, most people can spot trends and see changes if it's more visual. So for example, if we take our Google Analytics analysis that we do for our clients, we will always graph that. So we share the graphs with the clients and they can see what's going on without bamboozling them with a load of figures. Okay, so we've done some activity, we've measured it. Most important thing is to have a formal review process. Capture what you thought. Remember the example of the guys that had a trade show every 4 years? If they don't capture what they felt at the time, people's responses and what they said on the stand, they're going to have forgotten about that. Certainly by 6 months in, let alone 3 years in. So write it down somewhere. You can always refer back to it in the future. So to sum up, don't think planning is a chore and a bore and it won't help you. It's easy and simple, and just make sure it's part of your routine. So check your strategy. If your strategy is right, your business is going to survive. If you're then good at marketing, it's going to grow quickly. Secondly, have a plan. Just having a plan, doesn't matter what format it's in, a written plan puts you in the top 20% of business performers. So why wouldn't you want to be with them? Thirdly, keep it as simple as you can. Don't make life too complicated. Better a simple plan that you look at and review and use regularly than one that just gets shelved and only gets dusted and looked again next year. So it's got to be workable, usable, it's got to be alive in your business. Measurement can be tricky, so think about, before you do an activity, think about how you're going to measure it, what do you have to put in place before you do something so that you can measure whether it worked or not. And then the regular formal reviews. I promise you, if you have a monthly review of your marketing, just going through the review process, checking back to your plan, you will improve, so stick with it. So that's everything I need to say on planning. I really hope it was helpful. And if you'd like a copy of the tools that we use, you're very welcome. You can email me, that's my email address there, jill@aardvarkmarketing.co.uk, or you can contact BizSmart and they'll put you in touch with me.
Great, thank you very much, Jill. You've got some questions coming through. The first one is from Simon, and he asked, I've tried to put time in my diary to plan, but something always gets in the way. Why should this become a habit and do it at all?
Well, I hope I've explained why it should become a habit, because it is just so valuable, Simon. It really is, just going through that process. But I think the basic problem with marketing is this. And marketing is never ever urgent, unless you've got a PR deadline or an exhibition, and most of the time we don't have those. It's never got to be done now. Whereas you think of a sales lead coming into a business, somebody puts an inquiry in and you want to deal with that straight away. It's really important, and you drop everything. Or a customer's got something they need you to do urgently, you drop everything. Marketing has to get out of that drop everything culture. So put a date in your diary with you and senior managers if necessary. And if you have to move the diary date, at least you did put the time aside. And once you got into the habit of doing that every month or every quarter, or whatever's sensible for you, becomes a habit, and you see the value of the planning because you get the review process and you improve what you're doing going forward. So I do understand that most people struggle with putting that time aside, and it isn't part of their regular process. But if you just put it in the diary, try and make it a habit, it will benefit you, I promise you. Stick with it.
Great, thank you very much. Your next question is from Ian, and it's about budgets, and he asks, finding the right amount to spend on my marketing budget is a challenge. What is a sensible figure would you suggest?
This is something we get asked all the time, particularly when we first start working with customers or they're just making inquiries with us. And there isn't an easy answer. There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. If you're not spending 5% of your turnover, for most businesses, you're under-investing. And if you want to grow, you should be thinking about investing a bit more. But what worries people is they don't know whether they're investing or wasting money. So that's kind of another issue, is whether they've got the strategy right. But 5%, if you don't know what to spend, it's probably a reasonable benchmark for most businesses. But there's two things you can do. You can either say, right, that's the top-down approach. This is how much I'm planning to sell. This is how much I should be investing, and can I cover everything I want to do with that? That's the top-down approach. Or you can work bottom-up and say, well, this activity I know gives us a really good return. I want to do a bit more of that. And then the second activity I know works, but we haven't got quite good at tweak, but let's put a little bit more money into that. So you're adding up your activity bit by bit or month by month. So if you do both those approaches, you look at the top-down figure overall, see if that makes sense, and the bottom-up figure, and add that all up and see where you get to. If those figures are reasonably close, you're probably about right. But you've always got business advisors, haven't you? You've got BizSmart advisors to help you with these things if you're struggling, because not all businesses are the same. Your business might not fit into that general category I've given you. So ask your advisor for help if you're stuck.
Thank you. You got another question. Louise says, if I don't have any marketing experience, where should you suggest I start?
Start, but get some advisors, and there's different places you can go for that. Your BizSmart advisor will be fine. Places like the FSB or Chamber of Commerce might put you in the direction of advisors, but they don't give advice themselves. Peer-to-peer mentoring is great, so something like the smart boards, where you're talking to different business owners in the same boat as you, or just grab an expert. So anybody who's involved in BizSmart is very welcome to pick up the phone to me. But if you really don't know where to start and it's just a blank sheet and it's very scary, always ask for some help just to get you started, even if they don't do the whole project for you. They'll give you some useful pointers.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you again, Jill, for hosting today's webinar. I will be sending out a copy of today's presentations with Jill's full contact details on there. I just want to thank you all again for joining us, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.